Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host, David Straggy. Here in the room, we have the Inside Movies Galore crew. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
And today we have a film that kind of started a franchise from 1986, directed by Michael Mann, who, and one of the reasons I think we wanted to touch bases on this film is uh, uh, um, back a couple of episodes we did a film called, well, a mini series called The Beast, which starred a William Peterson, and we started flipping around whether we wanted to do this film, so we decided to go with it. So, Katie, since you've never seen this film before, why don't you tell us a little bit of of the storyline, at least from your perspective? And
Okay. Well, I didn't read a nice plot synopsis or anything before doing this, so it's going to be all over the place.
that's fine.
But basically, it's about I don't know what he is, a forensic something. See, the wording's going to be bad. The Will Graham character. I don't know what he does, but he can pathologize what murders do or whatever at the crime scene. So that's part of the work that he's doing for the
Probably,
police or the FBI or whoever it is,
is a
trying to figure out what there's a murder and he's trying to figure it out, or there's a murderer, a serial killer, and he's trying to help them figure it out. And it's funny because I actually saw the whole Hannibal TV series, and this part of the story is adapted for that. So I was kind of watching it and comparing it to that as well. But yeah, I'm not the wrong person to ask to give a synopsis of the movie, so you might want to move on to somebody else.
it's cool.
I'll take a stab at it if
Go
you
ahead.
Please do.
All right. So the movie follows Will Graham, who is a special agent with the FBI, who is able to get inside the head of serial killers in order to catch them. He was the one who famously caught the notorious Hannibal Lecter, and so our dear Will he comes out of retirement in order to be hot on the trail of the Tooth Fairy, who is a poorly named serial killer who is seeking to become more than what he is, which is, in his eyes, kind of invisible and not desired. And he has a very complex mythology regarding, transforming into the Red Dragon and that sort of thing. And so, in other words, it's a way to have Will explore the dark side that he has been suppressing after having had his run in with Hannibal Lecter all those years ago.
See, Dane did a much better job of that. You should let me know ahead of time if you're going to make me do that, and I'll prepare.
I just pick random people just to see if they can, you know.
Never pick me to do that unless unless I say I want to do it, because I always have to really think about the whole movie. And yeah, it's Dane was very good at that. Very summed it up very well. But yeah, because I've been thinking about it in comparison to the TV series and trying to figure out what was the same, what was different, and I realized in so doing, I kind of lost track of what was the movie and where the movie ends and the TV series picks up and all of that. So,
Alrighty, and what were your thoughts on the film as you were watching it? What did you what did you think about it?
I liked it. Again, in comparing it to the TV series, I definitely like this TV series adaptation of this part of the story a little bit better. I felt like they were a little more in depth on the TV series, and this. So having seen that first, I saw more of the in depth story. So this there was a little. I was kind of lacking. I was really wanting to see more of the Francis Dollarhide character, more in depth about what made him tick, and I feel like we didn't get a lot of that. So there was a lot of that for me, just because I had kind of had higher expectations. But overall, I thought, in looking at it from a movie that came out in 1986, I actually thought it was pretty progressive in terms of, like, I bet you in 1986, like, the style and everything was really on point. Like, didn't the director also do Miami Vice? 'Cause it felt like really Miami Vicey
Well,
to me.
he
The
did the
whole
movie adaptation of Miami Vice, and he later,
okay,
well, that was later on, and then he went on to do like Heat and Last of the Mohicans, and a couple other things.
because yeah, it just had a real like Miami Vice feel to me somehow. I don't know if it was just the cool threads and the
Well,
ocean setting or what.
uh, Brandon, was this a first time watch or was this a rewatch for you?
This was the third time I've watched it, actually. Um, I actually watched this long before I watched the famous one. I
Which
didn't
one,
watch
Red Dragon or?
Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, okay.
Because Silence of the Lambs, I didn't watch until about, well, it's been a lot longer now, about 6 or 7 years ago. Whereas I watched this one probably much longer ago than that. It struck me more as an intensive police procedural. Almost reminds me nowadays when I revisit it of a more intensive episode of NCIS or
Which is kind of funny because later on, William Peterson went on to star in NCIS. And if you notice that his superior, Jack, who um, enlists him back to look into the psychological profiling, he was on Law and Order.
Dennis Farina, that guy is like a mobster or a cop in everything he's in.
Yep.
I loved him ever since I first saw him in Get Shorty.
He's aged well too, I will say.
Red Raven, was this a first time watch for you?
Yeah, this was my first time watching it, and I liked it. I thought it was kind of slow moving at times, but then there was parts of it that I really liked.
Okay, and what were some of the parts that you liked about the film?
Just like when they were investigating him and trying to, figure out who he was and breaking down, who he was as a killer and stuff like that.
Okay. Dane, if there was a specific moment in the film that you could describe to us, that you could pinpoint, that you specifically, as a filmmaker, see it stand out.
Oh, I'm trying to think, because like the thing that really stuck out to me about the film throughout was just how beautifully shot it was and how stylistic it was. Like it had a lot of great moments of use of slow motion. Like it actually used camera zooms in a way that was beneficial for the story. It wasn't gimmicky. Lots of moving camera shots, lots of good usages of limited space and just letting a shot play out in master as opposed to doing a lot of cutting. I don't know. It's really hard to pinpoint down. I know that, like we were talking earlier about the very beginning, which has just it's an interesting shot, reverse shot, because they're sitting on like a log or something, and they're sitting on opposite sides facing each other. So it is shot, reverse shot, but it's not what you're used to seeing with that kind of setup. Plus, like the silhouette of Jack Crawford and Will's wife against the sunset was just absolutely beautiful. And I'm trying to think what else. The climax was well done.
I thought the end was really good where that song started playing, what is it, In the Garden of Eden or whatever?
Inagata Davida by Iron Butterfly.
Yeah.
The thing that I noticed is that who here has seen Silence of the Lambs?
Me.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing that I noticed during the film is that the same song Inagata Davida was played during the same sequence where you are introduced to Billy the Kid.
You mean Buffalo Bill?
Buffalo Bill. Although he was I think one of his nicknames was Billy the Kid as well, I think.
See, I haven't even seen Silence of the Lambs, and you could just tell that that was part of that other movie. Like, for whatever reason, I've seen bits and pieces of Silence of the Lambs, and that's one thing that does stick out, is that one little part there.
Yeah, and it's like they reused that song specifically for that serial killer. And what's interesting is there are similarities in the serial killers themselves.
Yeah.
Just
Well, aren't the stories all based off of books written by the same person?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
so
this one
that
is
makes
based
sense.
off of Red Dragon,
Sure.
which, believe it or not, the series was based off of Red Dragon from the start, because
Right.
the series had Will throughout the whole series, where you didn't see Starling throughout the series at all.
Well, Silence of the Lambs was, I thought, where she appeared, and that was like the second book, right?
Correct. And then Hannibal was the third. So,
yeah, the very controversial Hannibal novel, and then the equally controversial Hannibal movie. But the I really liked the characterization of Will in this. Now, I'll be honest. Also, I saw The Silence of the Lambs when I was like 13, 14 years old. I couldn't get enough of it. I absolutely adored it. And still to this day. I've only seen bits, and I've seen Hannibal, the movie, not the show. And I have only seen bits and pieces of Red Dragon. I really wish I had seen it, or maybe I'll see it subsequently now that I've seen Manhunter, because they're adapted from the same book. Because one thing I know that is in the film Red Dragon is that we actually see Will Graham taking down Hannibal Lecter, and actually taking him in. So in other words, the hero and villain dynamic is established much earlier and much more thoroughly, because we actually see him taking him down as opposed to just being told about it. Plus, it's Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter instead of Brian Cox.
And in the TV show, the dynamic between Will Graham and Dr. Lecter is a lot more muddy, which makes it really super interesting. Like, I didn't, in this movie, I felt like their relationship was really pretty bland. Whereas, again, comparing it to the TV series, it's so developed. And there's so much that goes on between the two of them that I was sort of disappointed again that, like, the relationship wasn't as interesting. And I also didn't like this Hannibal Lecter very much either. I'm very spoiled with the Mads Mikkelsen Hannibal Lecter from the series. Well, and obviously,
see, I grew up watching. I grew up watching Anthony Hopkins as a Lecter, but then when I saw this film, I was like so taken aback that the guy who was playing Hannibal Lecter, Brian Cox, that he played it in such a he could have been your next neighbor kind of person, instead of the cold calculating hello, Agent Starling.
The Mads Mikkelsen Hannibal Lecter from the series is really good, because he's super calculated but also very easy to like, and so this one, the Brian Cox one, was he didn't seem as refined, or I don't know. There's just something missing there for me
Well,
personally.
I think it's partially because honestly the way that, well, okay, a couple things. First of all, this film obviously came out before Silence of the Lambs, so it's able to stand on its own in a way that no other film or TV series after Silence of the Lambs is able to do completely, because everything that comes out featuring Hannibal Lecter after Silence of the Lambs is going to be always compared to that. But Manhunter came first, and so in other words, the template for what Hannibal Lecter could be wasn't really fully established. My big beef with is what Brian Cox was bringing to it. What I liked about it as something different was that he did seem like a bit more of like a real person. Because I mean, Anthony Hopkins to me will always be Hannibal Lecter, but I've heard some people say, oh, he's too much like a supervillain or like a Bond villain or something, and I could see that, but and then like with Brian Cox's version, he does behave a bit more like a real person you could conceivably meet. He does have some eccentricities in his like speech style and his furrowed forehead and things like that. His cunningness on the phone and everything like that. And apparently, he based his performance on Scottish serial killer Peter Emanuel, and I'll have to obviously look him up to know that. But the point is that the template for what a Hannibal Lecter could be had not really been established yet. But I also think that the hero villain relationships were not quite as fully established as they could have been. But again, I think that Hannibal Lecter was not a hugely significant part of that story in the way that, and again, even in Silence of the Lambs, where he has much more of a presence, he's not even on screen all that much, so
Right.
it's more so how can you make this person have weight while not being on screen very much. And I think Hannibal Lecter or Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs, he had a gravitas to him in a way that, not to say Brian Cox didn't, it's more the fact that they didn't really give him a lot of room to, they didn't really give him a lot of room to roam and a lot of space to really be like this menacing force. He was just kind of there and being this threatening person that traumatized Will from the beginning. Except again, we're just told about that. We don't see it. And to be fair, we do get inside Will's head pretty well, and I think William Peterson did a good job as being this kind of messed up guy. But yeah, I feel like they could have done, and I think that's also, then you could say the flip side with Red Dragon in 2002, because Hannibal Lecter had been like the mystique of that character had been so firmly established by that time. Then you probably could have even said, oh, the focus is too much on Hannibal Lecter and not enough on Will, which again, I'd have to see that film in order to completely say that. But it's like there comes a time when a portrayal that's so good that it sets the tone for the rest of time. Uh, it's like if he weren't in the story as much, you'd say, well, we wanted more Hannibal Lecter, when maybe the story couldn't support it as much. So
My
I don't know if any of that made sense, but
my thing about the film is that there was not much screen time for Dr. Chilton in this film, because in Silence of the Lambs, he's a little bit sleazy, and he's constantly overhearing all of the prisoners' conversations. He's got more of a control factor.
I am not just some turnkey, Miss Starling. Yeah, I mean, Dr. Chilton is in there, but I mean, to be fair, also they had Freddie Lowndes, who was the scumbag of that movie, of Manhunter. They had Freddie Lowndes as the gossip columnist there. So, I mean, the scumbag quota, I guess, had been filled. But I do like seeing Dr. Chilton in there, and I like Dennis Farina does a great job as Jack Crawford. I do like. I mean, it's different interpretations of the character, but I do overall like the one from Silence of the Lambs a little bit better, mostly because of the relationship that he has with Clarice Starling. But then again, Dennis Farina's Jack Crawford has the perfect relationship with this version of Will Graham. So it's kind of a give and take, but I did like seeing those characters in there in some form, even though obviously their actors change.
Brandon, if there was a scene that you could pick out that you enjoyed the most from the film, what would you choose?
Actually, just it's really hard to pick any particular. To me, anything that had to do with the Hannibal Lecter. See, I thought that the guy who played that actually gave a very, very good performance in comparison. I've never seen the TV series, so I can't really compare to that. But as far as versus the other one, and just showing him off his intellect, like when he had come up with that plan, just right off the bat, tampering with the phone, getting the address, basically showing you, I've gotten under your skin before, I'm going to do it again, and you can't stop me. That whole initial scene, and then culminating it with, yeah, I've already not just gotten this, I've gotten your home address, and I'm going to use that against you. I actually believe that sets off the dynamic, which I do feel was even deeper than Silence of the Lambs. I don't know if it was presented as well, but I felt like that was a deeper set, just because of, well, I mean, because of the past issues. I mean, the man was actually driven to the point of having to be psychiatrically treated because he had identified with Hannibal that much. Had let him get in his head, and had been using most of the movie fighting to keep him out.
And I mean that it's definitely there, but I think that it's more of like a stylistic / psychological portrait of Will, and not as much invested in Hannibal Lecter himself as perhaps we nowadays would like it to be, just because of we know how important he's become in our culture.
If you want that, watch the TV series, because it goes in depth on both characters quite a bit in what you're discussing right now, their relationship, and how Will Graham basically gets driven insane by Hannibal Lecter, and how manipulative Hannibal is. His character is really, really developed. Both characters are very developed in the TV series. I think there's 3 seasons total.
I actually find that Michael Madsen, or what is his name? Michael
Mads Mikkelsen.
I find that his character of the TV series, and I followed it till its very end. I was kind of disappointed that it left it hanging there, but I felt like his character was cold, calculating, and a little bit more, unapproachable. To see whether he actually had any feeling, whereas Anthony Hopkins, on the other hand, seemed to have more of a feeling when you saw the relationship between him and Agent Starling, so to speak. So, not that I'm trying to get into the Silence of the Lambs or anything like that for a further discussion, but I felt like his character was. I liked his character very much, but and I think they delved more into the cooking factor of his
quite a bit on a TV show that they really did. That was one of the neat angles that I liked about that,
where he would start preparing something that looked delicious, and you'd see him talking to whoever was his next victim, and they made it more more about that aspect, where he was more of a cannibal then they played on that factor, which came out of the movie Hannibal itself. So where he was actually eating the brains of that one agent. But
I really really love the how strong the colors were in the cinematography, and I loved the soundtrack. I thought the score was incredible. So those two things together, I think, really helped sell a lot of the mood and helped to make it a really strong stylistic experience, even if, say, some aspects of character possibly could have been fleshed out better. But then again, I do think that there was a lot of good subtlety in the performances.
I agree, to a mild extent. I mean, there again, you've got I mean, the one thing that I could definitely see is that William Peterson was definitely younger, even though they gave him a flare of steel through his hair. But I think he was actually younger than that. So I think whoever did his makeup or whatnot actually highlighted his hair to be a little bit older than he was, at least to me. Especially when you see his performance in Beast, when he's ultimately relatively older than that, So, but did anyone else have anything else to say?
I did want to say that one of the things I feel like people always make the mistake about, especially in the series, the earlier series. I mean, when you get to the movies, Hannibal, and you go through these, it's a different message. But when you're talking about Manhunter or even Silence of the Lambs to the lesser extent, the movies, Hannibal is not the main character, and nor is he intended. He is intended to be in the background. And he is that manipulating force in the background that is nudging the main characters, but the movie isn't him, so to speak. Whereas I do believe that Anthony Hopkins' performance, it made the entire movie about him when it wasn't intentionally about him. Whereas in this one, I feel that subtlety played through much better in that way, and again, a less strong performance sometimes can be useful in this particular aspect. I should not say less strong, subtle. Subtle is the better word.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like that played off of the characters, where the focus was keeping him legitimately in the background and manipulating from the shadows. And again, that's just my take on how I look at those two. When you go into movies like Hannibal, where Hannibal Lecter is supposed to be the main character, or the TV series where he's kind of the main character, I'm guessing. Again, I haven't seen it. That's a different matter.
Mm-hmm.
He does do a lot of manipulating, though, in the TV series, like you're saying. I definitely got that, in this movie as well, where you see that he can do a lot from a jail cell, and he shows his abilities pretty clearly. And that there's a lot of that in the TV series of how, just by the things he says or suggests, how he can manipulate situations and get people to do things that without having to really do anything. So I would imagine, I haven't read the books, but I would imagine that that's carried through in the storylines of the books as well.
I would have to say so too. I've actually read like at least two of the books myself. I read, I believe, Red Dragon, and I read bits and pieces. I think I read the Silence of the Lambs, and I also read bits and pieces of the Hannibal book. And for the most part, most of the films follow the books to a certain degree, which is why I think Silence of the Lambs holds true to a lot of people. And that there. I mean, whenever you think of a serial killer, you go. A lot of people go back to either Psycho or Silence of the Lambs, and those are two of the films that everyone always says. Have you ever seen that? So,
Which is why I've never seen Silence of the Lambs from start to finish all the way through, because for my, entire adult life, for sure, it's been so pop cultured to death that I never actually took the time to sit down and watch it.
well,
I've heard enough of the story and seen enough clips and know enough bits and pieces that I just never did it. That's why I started with Hannibal, the TV series, because I wanted to get like the full storyline and figured I'd work my way from there. So this works in perfectly.
I consider the Hannibal's TV series a separate entity entirely, because even though it took off on its own spectrum, and it brought a lot of culture and color to the Hannibal story.
Well, I think the way it was casted versus how some of these movies are casted, like for example, like I said, this storyline does play out in Hannibal, and I as soon as I saw Freddie Lounds, I was like, oh, Freddie Lounds is a guy, because Freddie Lounds is a female in the TV show, and Jack Crawford is black. It's Lawrence Fishburne in the TV show, so I enjoy the movies or the TV series that can kind of do some of that diverse casting and still those characters play out. And I think, Freddie Lounds as a female just adds that element of sex to the storyline where, she's still that sleazy, journalist, but, she also can get in bed with these guys and gets her way that way. Whereas the male Freddie Lounds character might have some different limitations around that. So, I like to see how the same story is adapted in different ways over different timelines and stuff. So I was looking for a lot of that stuff in this film.
Well,
comparing it to the
I think down the way, I think you per se will always compare it to the TV show because you liked it so much that I think you yourself will base it on the TV series.
Well, it's the only thing I have to go on at this point because I haven't seen any of the other movies. So.
Well, eventually, I think we'll touch on those just to go through.
Did anyone hear recently in the news that they found the Golden State killer?
Yes, they did.
That was crazy story. The guy that went on like a killing spree in the 70s. They recently found him.
Yeah, I just heard about that the other day, and it's amazing, what technology comes up with. And I think that all boils down to DNA.
And it was through like an ancestry website is how they tracked him down.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think things are now starting to come full circle on some of the things that happened, at one point in time, whether it was a string of murders or whatnot. You have no idea how many unsolved case files there are that police have to still go through all the way back to the 30s. So, I mean, because of DNA technology and things of that nature nowadays, they're going through all the older case files and solving things as we speak.
Yeah, they're actually looking into the Zodiac killer. They think they might be able to use this new method to trap him.
Yeah, that's what they said.
That'll be interesting if they actually do succeed.
Yeah, because they've had different leads as to who they think the real Zodiac killer was, and people have different theories and all that, but nothing ever definitive. And I mean, regardless of who the Zodiac killer is or was, that person's probably dead by now of probably natural causes. But even so, it'd be good to put that to rest.
Well, I know several years, or was it a year ago or so ago, they seem to think that they know who Jack the Ripper is by by certain sources or whatnot. I think they went through DNA process of cape or cloak or cloth that was actually found on one of the murder victims that was, and they believe it's this butcher that was in and around the area, even though, it was always, supposedly someone who knew medical techniques and another possibility was that it could have been connected to royalty,
Mhm.
So, I mean,
I've heard that conspiracy that it was supposed to cover up some illegitimate son or something like that.
but in any case, did anyone else have anything else to add to the Manhunter film itself?
Well, I think what I like about it is because it came out before Silence of the Lambs, it doesn't have to hold up to the same standards that anything else after Silence of the Lambs has to hold up to. Um, and as a result, you see a lot of the strengths of the film. Like, it's really beautifully shot, music is gorgeous, it's got a great sense of atmosphere. It is a little slow moving, and I remember I tried to watch it last night, and I had to restart it today before this podcast because I was just so tired last night. And it's not a good movie to watch when you're tired because, like, when I was
I
watching it,
know.
it came off as very dry when I was super tired and slow and
I had to
slow.
watch it 3 times to
I
get all the
know.
way through because I kept falling asleep.
Yeah, and it's not for me. It wasn't really the fault of the movie. It was just that I was so tired. But I appreciated it when I was rested and everything. But it's a film that I'm definitely going to have to study as a filmmaker, just because it's so well shot and it's able to communicate a whole lot of ideas without having to be overly explicit about them. Even though I do think that some aspects of characterization could have been a little bit more visual. Um, but the point is that sometimes it's good to try and divorce oneself from what one knows that's been ingrained in the cultural consciousness and be able to look at it on its own terms.
Like you
So,
said, it reminded me of like Miami Vice or
yeah. Well, or like even better example is like the fact that there was, I think, a 1920s version of the Wizard of Oz that came out before the famous 1939 version that everyone knows, and then of course there have been many subsequent remakes, revisions of the Oz story subsequently. So
There were
it's
earlier versions of Wizard of Oz too.
yeah, even before the 20s one, but that's the point is you gotta put yourself back in that mindset to fully appreciate certain things.
Oh yeah. Well, in any case, I think we covered a lot of ground here, so I think we're going to wrap this up here. And if everyone's okay with my choice that I was starting to talk about beforehand for next week, being that I believe it was called Whatever Happened to Aunt Alice, or I'll see if I can find my copy and get a copy of to you guys. If everyone's okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. And then
yeah.
I will wrap this up here. So, Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and where you're from?
Sure, I'm Katie Cadaver from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I am a body positive horror artist and alternative model. You can find me on patreon.com/Katie Cadaver or on Instagram at Third Eye Open. That's 3RDEYE0PEN. I'm also the makeup artist for horror punk band Ratbat Spider. You can listen to them at ratbatspider.bandcamp.com. And I am a dead girl for Dead Girls Dark Coffin Classics horror TV show. And you can watch the show at vimeo.com/DDCC. I also perform and produce for Grindhouse Tees Burlesque Productions, and you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Grindhouse Tees. And I recently became an editor for Movies Galore of Milwaukee, and I believe my first review should still be pretty easy to find on the page for Adam LaHoule's romantic comedy, The Backslide. And I'll be working on some more reviews as soon as I get caught up. I have a show this weekend for Burlesque, but then hopefully after that I'll have a little time to get into doing some more movie reviews.
Awesome. And Red Raven, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm Red Raven, and I am a music promoter from Milwaukee, and I'm also on Dedger's Dark Coffin Classics. And we have a show coming up on June 17th at the Frequency in Madison with 4 different metal bands.
Awesome. And you know the names of those metal bands?
Yeah, Repaid in Blood, H1Z1, Skyla, and Chewing Teeth.
Awesome. And from what I understand, this is the last time that you'll be able to see a performance at this.
Yeah, it's going to be closing down June 30th.
Cool. So definitely, folks, if you're listening out there, definitely check this out. It'll be the one and only time that you'll be able to see a performance at this venue. So check it out if you can. Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. I am Dane Kyle, independent filmmaker based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And you can find me on Facebook and YouTube and all the various social media networks that people are so fond of. And let's see, I got my latest short film, The Big Blind, done and submitted to festivals in LA, New York, Atlanta, a couple places in England. Just to start with, and I'll expand to more as I go along. What else? And I'm working on a fan series, a fan film, my first feature, a couple other projects in various stages. And David, I did talk to the mask maker that I've been talking to for the project that you were going to help me produce. And he said he's going to get to it this week finally, because he's been busy with making masks for Doctor Who and things like that. So, he's been hopping, but the point is that that is going to be happening soon.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's good news
Yep.
for that. Then you can then you can start working on getting that one.
Yep, indeed.
Out and running, and then we can decide what we want to do down the road. So, in any case, Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I am from Septum Sen versus the World. We are a YouTube channel dedicated to the love and collection of physical media. Recently, we've been more involved in covering some of those lesser known films. I've had actually a couple of what do they call it? We've actually paired a little bit with Movies Galore, doing some retrospectives or some looks at movies like House Shark.
Crossover episodes.
Yes. House Shark being the one I remember the most right now, because I just got that in the mail, so I have a physical copy of it. And we've been looking at several of them, and hopefully we've got some new ones coming up in the future, so I do look forward to that. Hoping to get my my co-host also in on that, so we'll see what else we can do in that area.
Definitely. So, and my name is David Streggy. I am the host of this show, and also a blogger for Movies Galore of Milwaukee, and also a small-time producer. And yesterday we had a interview with one of my produced projects, directors of Dark Side Tales. So definitely check that out on the channel if you can, if you're listening. And earlier today I had a interview with another produced project that I was party to called Witchtown, and it was definitely an entertaining discussion. So definitely check it out when you get a chance. That is also on the channel, and like Brandon said, we're definitely going to be doing some crossover episodes of some weird out there films, whether it be animated or just totally disgusting and depraved that you can't even you have to run screen from the room. Definitely check out some of those episodes coming up. So stay tuned next week as we cover an older film called I believe it's called Whatever Happened to Aunt Alice, or something to that effect. So stay tuned for more exciting discussions as we go through another film discussion. In any case, everyone say good night.
Good night.
Right.